Social System Mapping On-Ramp session for August 10th, 2020. I'm glad to have you all here. I'm your host today, Christine Capra, co-founder of sumApp and Greater Than the Sum. And let me just stop sharing really briefly. Tim, could you wave and turn your, that's Tim, my partner, the other co-founder of Greater Than the Sum and sumApp. And go back to sharing my screen. As you get into this with us, if you do, you'll discover that we sort of try to think about the work of social system mapping in 3 different categories of roles relative to map making. One is the visioning role, one is the technical or mapping role, and one is the sense making role, or we call those the different hats. I tend to wear all 3 of the hats, but Tim is stronger at the technical hat than me. But as you sort of get into it, you'll probably start in one of those hats and then either find other people to work with who can wear the other hats, or you'll branch out. But it helps to sort of have a sense of where would I begin if I were doing this work. So we sometimes identify ourselves by our hats. Okay. So this is the first of our monthly community of practice sessions. On the second Monday, today we do an on-ramp session, which is basically an introductory level, sharing a map, a social system map that someone in our community has made. You might have signed up at the time when Jenny Mulholland Bears was planning on sharing her Richland nature map. But she had to cancel, so today I'm filling in and I'm going to share our community of practice map. This is the best place to get started, to get introduced to social system mapping and just see what a map is and start to see the range of maps and what the common patterns are, as well as to just connect a little bit and see the other mappers in the community. The 3rd Monday of the month, we have a deep dive conversation, which usually grows out of something, questions that people are asking in the on-ramp sessions. This coming next Monday, we will, on August 17th, we will be doing, we'll be combining human system dynamics models with social system mapping with a colleague of mine, Lisa Negstead, who's a human systems dynamics practitioner. And she and I think about how to use the 2 to inform each other. And then on the 4th Monday of the month, we have Tech Talk. So the 3rd Monday is sort of for the visionary sense maker, hat wearers. And then the 4th Monday is definitely for the mapper, technical people. And what we're going to talk about this month is on August 24th is understanding segments and the custom survey filter, which you probably don't even know exists, but has some interesting uses. Okay. So if you want to learn more about social system mapping, the first thing a big suggestion would be to be on the map that we're going to share today. So Kara has put, I think, or will in a moment, put a link to the opt-in form for that social system map. So if you're really quick, you can get on there before we even start looking at it. Otherwise, do it later. And that will give you a walkthrough experience of what it's like to be a member of a community that's being mapped. So that can really help you conceptualize what's going on. Learning more, also joining our Slack team, which Kara will put a link to that. And then checking out our knowledge base, which Kara will also put a link to that in the chat right now. So those are 3 sources of more experience and information, learning about social system mapping. And then also, if you're going through something and you get stuck or you're confused or you're just trying to conceptualize how should I proceed with a partner, I have office hours. It's actually a half hour, but sometimes it goes over if there's enough people or a big enough topic. But every Thursday from 5 to 5:30 p.m. Central. So you can find the link to that in our Slack. And so if you just need to pop in and ask a quick question or 2, jump in and I'd love to see you. Also, if I have to cancel, I put that in Slack. So for today's agenda, oops. Okay, thanks. We're gonna do some chat intros in a minute, and then I have a quick poll to see where everybody's at, and then we're gonna walk through the social system map and community of practice map. And when I say that, what I mean is we're a community of mapping practitioners, people who have made maps in their networks or make maps professionally as consultants for networks. We're learning together, and we recently decided that, you know, if social system mapping is a tool for self-organizing and for network building, we really ought to have a social system map of our own. So that's the one I'm going to walk you through today, just to show you it in the context of this community that you're being part of this Zoom call in. So I'll show you the map, and then we'll do some questions and answers. And then for those of you who are new to this, we usually have, so we have a formal structure that goes for an hour. So we start at the top of the hour, and then when we get to the top of the next hour, we have a formal closure and say goodbye and thanks for coming. But if you're just burning with more questions, or you have some things you want to talk with someone else about or with me about, Kara and Tim and I will stick around for an extra half an hour to be available for whatever kind of informal chatting you want. So if you want to do that, just stay online after we do our closing. And then let's go to the map. So first of all, just to help us, so this is the knowledge base Kara gave you a link to. So that's a good resource, just giving you a visual of it. And for those of you for whom this is new, this one piece can be confusing, which is a social system map is basically made with two different technology platforms, and then they are designed to work together. So the first platform is Kumu, which is an online data visualization platform. So I'm just sort of showing you the landing page of Kumu right now. These kinds of, you can just, anybody can have an account. You can have a free account for public maps or a paid account for private maps. But basically Kumu visualizes they're graphs. In math, it's called a graph, which is, you know, circles and lines. So whenever you see something with circles and lines, and I'll just show you in their gallery, they have a whole lot of interesting kinds of maps that you can click on and walk through presentations about. But when you see these dots and lines, you're looking at a graph, and these graphs can be of any item, any entity, and then a connection between them. So they could be books, they could be ideas, they could be systemic forces, they could be people, all kinds of things. And then the lines just are telling us something about the connection from one dot to another dot. So that's a universe of possibility that exists in this visualization paradigm. And in Kumu, as we'll see in a minute, you not only have your dots and your lines, but you can click on them and learn and open up more, see more details about them. You can add filters or different views, so you can slice and dice and decorate your data in all different kinds of ways. So as you can see from this little thing here, we have a lot of visually different instances. They're all, these ones are just a front page, but you know, they're all dots and lines in some way, form or another, but they're all presented differently because they're different kinds of data and they're trying to accomplish different things. So that's the platform that we visualize the data in. The thing with Kumu though is that it's a great for visualizing, but it does not help you capture data. So if the data is all in your head, like it's my library and I'm just going to map out my library, that's great. But when you're trying to map data and you need to ask other people things about themselves or about their relationship amongst each other, Kumu won't do that for you. And doing it in a survey can suddenly turn into the data doesn't come out in a way that Kumu can read. And so because we were doing this kind of mapping, Tim and I ended up hiring developers and creating a tool to make gathering that data easier. So that tool is sumApp, and this is just a front end picture of it. So when you see that, you can, you know, oh, that's the give me an account view of sumApp, and then this is the back end of it, where you would work as a consultant or as a mapper. You would go in here, and this is the place where you set up your survey and define your connection options and have your list of members etc. We're not going into that now, but I just wanted to show you there's a back end where the administrator works, and then there's a front end where your members interact. So this is the front end of our social system map. And if you clicked on the opt-in link that Kara put in the chat a while ago and actually followed it through, you'd end up landing in a place that looks like this, where we'd ask you to load a picture of yourself and say a little bit really brief about yourself. Then there's a profile. And the profile is completely editable by the map administrator, and usually is defined by, you know, some combination of members of the network. And, you know, with ongoing feedback, it can be continually added to. You can continue to add new questions or tweak the options. So this is completely editable, and the edit or the data will stay put. So you can ask people to go back in and just change a question, you know, answer a new question or two. They don't have to do everything over and over again. And then the biggest piece of sumApp is that then when you have a list of members, so these are the people who are in the map that we're going to look at in just a moment. And so each person has loaded a picture of themselves, and this is that little bit of information that we asked for on the front page. And then with these, we call these the member tiles. With these tiles now, interesting. You can click on the tile and then answer questions about your connection to that person and tell us more about the relationship. And then once every member has done that, or as members are doing that, this data stays in place as long as the account is open. So you can add new people to it, and you can ask people to come back and update their information periodically. So let's say a year ago, or right now, SD and I are at a 1. We're acquaintances, but over time we become, you know, we start to have generative interaction, and then a year from now we're collaborating. So a year from now I would come in and I would change that. So that's the sumApp tool. I told you about the visualization tool is Kumu, and then the data gathering tool is sumApp. As the data goes into sumApp, we have a link that just feeds the data directly into Kumu. You do your mapping in Kumu, you make your decorations, your different filters, your views, etc. And then we take the embed link from Kumu and put it back into a tab here in sumApp. And so this is the map. I'm gonna just click to here quickly. So this is the map in sumApp. And so that your members, as they come and put their data into these other parts, right away, their data feeds right into the map, so that it's continually being updated live, and that people can see, instantly see what it is they're giving their data to. So they can, you know, usually you do a survey and nobody knows what happens to that data, and people feel like, oh, what are they going to do with that, and why do they want it? Here they can see why and see what it's for. Okay, I'm going to pause here, and I'm just look at I've heard people coming and going. I just want to see if there's any. So I see Vanesh, looks like you just joined us, and I just want to greet you. And if you have want to unmute for just a second and say hi, so we can know we can hear you, that would be great, but you don't have to. Okay, I'm talking fast. Okay. And then just wanted to just take a pause and see if everyone's sort of with me, and if I've gone too fast, and if I should, if there's any questions that need to be answered before we go deeper into the map. And those whose faces I can see do not look like you have a question that needs to be answered. And those whose faces I can't see.
Question, Christine. Yeah. By map, you mean causal loop diagram, or there's also affinity diagrams, or what are we talking about specifically here?
Okay. So what we're talking about specifically, that's a really great question, is a social system map is kind of a different mapping paradigm that grew out of these tools that we made. and that eventually I relabeled because of that very question. And so a social system map is fundamentally a social network analysis map. So if you're used to a network map, that's like the foundation, but built on top of that is if you build into your survey systemic forces or different dimensions of the ecosystem that the people make up. So it's the fundamental premise is that there's a group of people that are trying to do that have some kind of change and tension around some kind of system. So food systems or social justice systems. And that group of people, you want to map not only who's working in that field, but what they bring to that field in terms of their skill sets, the dimensions of the system that they represent, such as stakeholder perspectives, things like that. So so Tim is telling me that, oh no, he's somewhere else. Never mind. I'm getting messages that I don't need to be attending to. Sorry about that. So, so fundamental, there's a network of people, and the most basic thing we're trying to understand is the relationships between the people. Then we can layer in, often we layer in things like skill sets or other assets that the people have access to. So it's a mashup essentially of a social network analysis map, an asset map, and then to the degree that within your network you add a systems thinking lens and you do any kind of causal loop analysis, you can also then connect the people to the causes. So in other words, if it's, let's just say it's a map looking at the causal loops related to homelessness. Okay, which people are advocates for homeless people, which people are work for the city, that sort of thing. So you can start to not only see the relationships among the people, but and what they bring to the system or to the change effort, but also what role they have in relation to the causal effects in the system. So that was kind of well, it's a necessarily long-winded thing because it's a kind of a complex topic, but that's what a social system map is, just a mashup between a system map, a network map, an asset map, and whatever else you think you want to throw in there. And then on top of that, we now have a thing called dual elements. So you can also map the relationships between people and organizations. So you can see which organizations are collaborating, which people have what kind of relationships for which organizations. Great question.
So I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Are all of these questions built into the profile, or can you add profile parameters? Mm-hmm. Is that the like survey?
Yeah, that's the survey. So the tool is designed to be as flexible and iterative and changeable as possible, while keeping in the data structured and keeping integrity of the data so that the data continues to work in Kumu and continues to represent your network members without them having to frequently redo things. So yeah, the survey is basically the profile, and that's totally designed by whomever creates the map.
Okay, so does it download into Excel or spreadsheet? You
can download it into Excel and do whatever you want with that data. But if you're making a social system map, you will normally take, there's a link, a JSON link that comes out of sumApp, and put that into Kumu so that you don't actually have to intervene with the data at all. It just goes straight into Kumu, and then you do your visualizations in Kumu. But sometimes people do want to, make other, pie charts or bar charts or just analysis with the core data, and you can definitely get at it in Excel or in a CSV file.
My other question while I have you was, is there public and private options for what to share with whom?
That's kind of, yes. I'm not going to go into detail at that right now, but the simple answer is yes, and the deeper answer is kind of depends on a number. There's various ways of thinking about that. And if you want to stick around for the extra half hour, I'd be happy to go into that. Okay. Okay. Anybody else have anything they're dying to know before we jump into examining this map a little bit? Okay. So you can still see my screen, right? Okay. So part of what we're doing when we're making, so we gathered the data, as I showed you in sumApp, and now we have information.
I don't think we can see your map.
No?
No, I mean, yeah, but we can't see your screen anymore.
Oh, hang on. You're right. Thank you. Thank you, Gladys. Can you see it now? Okay, great. Okay, so some of what I'm going to show you has to do with how Kumu functions, and some of it has to do with how we design a map. And these sort of design protocols are just things that have grown out of me and Tim's work, as well as just seeing how other members of our community do things. So a first thing to know is so here are the dots. These are the elements in the network. And if we click on them, I'm going to click on Tim. We can see, or if I click on Lisa, we can see their responses to the survey. So whatever they put up in that other page, this little piece here is the little snippet that was on the first page, and then obviously their picture shows up. You can click and open it bigger, and then their data. So this is just sort of the fundamental initial functionality in this, and then we can put, these are all custom made. So you need to learn how to, let me just, so this is defined in this advanced editor, which Tim has lots of little code snippets that are helpful. And if you go into Slack, he will help you learn how to do these things. But now we can make filters and filter on various dimensions of the respondent's answer. So in this instance, this particular map is all about this community of social system mappers. So the system that we're trying to do is we're trying to, develop the field of social system mapping. So the questions are all about social system mapping. So one is, how interested are you in this? And some people just want to be able to talk about it. Other people are just curious. And then other people would like to be able to make maps themselves, wear the visionary hat, wear the sense maker hat, wear the technical hat. So we can filter here and start to see who in our community is working on what. And then we can also see how serious they are about it, or how invested they are, because we asked a question called mapping investment. And some people are just, they're supportive. They think it's great and they want to, know about it, but they're not invested in it. And some people have spent time and money on learning how to do this work. And then for some people, it's what they do. For Tim and for me and Tim, it's a main component of it. It's all that we do. For these guys, it's a big piece of their overall offerings. So that's just an example. This is relative to our community, but for your community, it could be a very different set of questions and a very different set of filters here, and you will decide what those filters should be based on the needs of your community. We have one of our design sort of principles for designing a map has become to start really simple. So this view that you're looking at here, everybody's colored the same. I mean, the nodes, the decorations are the same. The nodes are the same size. There's no lines. It doesn't bounce around a whole lot. This is just what we call the directory view. It's simple. What we're trying to do is we're trying to go from a simple place that doesn't scare people and that people can enter into and sort of wrap their heads around a few pieces of what a Kumu map is. And then the views get increasingly more complex and further. So for instance, most people are interested at the directory level. Like this is definitely the entry point, is just who's here, what can I know about them? Then as the views get further more complex, they also get to places where a lot of fewer and fewer of your members are really going to care about the deeper levels, but your analyst types or your really geeky types will. And so one of the things you'll see when you look at our side panels, it gets increasingly more esoteric and more complex. So this is the directory view, fairly simple. Then we have an offers and asks view, where what we've done is in the survey, we've asked what kinds of skills, social system mapping skills, do you have that you're willing to share with other people? And what kinds of social system mapping skills do you need help with that you don't have? And then we cluster on those answers. So the data's in there, and then we say, okay, figuring out what to put into the survey and the connection questions. That's a skill set. And if we hover on that, now I'm gonna do a thing called focusing, which is you can select one node, and then when you focus on it, you will get just that node and the first, and the people who are connected to that node. In this instance, all of these lines are solid lines. So all of these people are saying, yep, I know how to do that and I could help with that. And we don't have anybody saying, I don't know how to do that and I need help. So let's find one that has, so this, for instance, this one, which is helping network members learn to read the visual mapping language, which is one of the things I'm working on right now with you guys a little bit, is there are a number of people who have dotted lines, and that means they feel like they could use some help. Like they don't entirely feel confident to help people learn how to read a map. And so we can start to see, okay, these people would like some help with it, but then Mary Roscoe, who's here with us this morning, feels comfortable with that. And so any of the people with a dotted line might want to reach out to Mary, or any of the other people with a solid line and say, hey, would you mind helping me with this? So this is the way that it becomes an asset map. These are the assets that people have to share, and these are the assets that people need. We continue to keep the filtering sort of paradigm up here, so you can still filter up there. And we have a little legend down here showing which is which. The next level is the involvement level. And this is where it behaves more like a social system map. We can see the connections among people. We can filter. We can say, I just want to see who's collaborating. And now I can see who the collaborators are. And I can see, you know, which collaborators have needs or offers. So now I can start to actually think about who could I reach out to? What people do I know that I should introduce to each other? And as we get more, we ask more sort of deeper questions here, and we can start to look at those as well. Then we get into more complicated views where we're just allowing you to cluster. Like, let's say we're going to cluster by how invested they are in mapping, and then what their interests are, and we can start to really slice and dice. As I said, these views further down are more for network staff, or really people who want to dig in and really think about the network structure and how they can help the network become more regenerative. Most people are going to be interested in the first 2 views and maybe in the first 3 views. But that's a pretty high level, big, simple, high level overview. I'm going to stop and let and hear what questions people have. And pause my voice for a moment. So does anybody have any questions or comments? Gladys?
So we're only on level 2, and I'm kind of wondering, like, what are the limitations on the different levels that might impact what of those features we might be able to develop?
Can you say more about what you mean by level 2?
Tier 2, I think.
Tier 2, okay. Okay, so she's referring to the sumApp accounts. sumApp accounts there are 4 tiers. There's tier 1, 2, 3, and 4. Tier 2 is, tier 1 is free but, and it doesn't have a survey, it just has it just gets at the connections. Tier 2 is $15 a month and you can go down to tier 1. So she's asking about and as the tiers get more expensive, they have more features. So the fundamental thing about tier 2 that you couldn't do, that you can see in this map, is more than one question about the connections. So you know how we have like acquaintance, generative interaction, collaborator, and then there are more questions about the person-to-person relationship. In tier 2, you will only have one of those questions. There's nothing else that you see here. So in tier 3, you could upload pre-existing data. You can't do that in tier 2, but we didn't do that here, and you wouldn't know anyway. Tim, can you think of anything in tier 2 that isn't shown? I mean, like, not all the features that aren't really part of this map anyway, but if there's anything in this map that you can't do in tier 2 aside
No, I think all that can be done in tier 2.
except the extra questions.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Other questions?
Christine, let me, just thinking, I mean, in describing a person describing their assets, I mean, I could see like the old resume format, bullet points. I did this, I did that, I did that. Star stories is one thing about that. But there's also like the where we create user stories, kind of like a picture of this is, this is who, what, when, where, how, and why of my life. I did this, why, because of that. The output was to this and to that. And much more of an integrated approach. Was there a slant in this methodology?
I mean, some of what you're referring to, you could simply ask questions of in the profile or the survey questions. So it could be, what's your greatest accomplishment, etc. The who would this so no one's ever asked me that quite before, so I'm just trying to formulate it in my mind. In my first gut response is to say, so it's going to be sort of there's a tension, I think, between what you're talking about and what we're doing, and I think it's an interesting tension. And I think that to take the paradigm that you're presenting and push towards that paradigm using this kind of a mapping tool and mapping paradigm would be a really generative exploration. And the two tensions I see is sumApp and social system mapping is really about the individuals within the context and within the system, and what and how we can support self-organizing system change using the map. And the underlying paradigm of what you're talking about feels valuable, but also really individualistic. And like, I might want to, like some of what seems really important to me about me might not be super relevant in this network. Or it might be that I want to have more dimensions of me that are expressed than this tool will represent. So I feel like that's really interesting. And there's a tension, and kind of. But I'm curious if any of the other people who've done mapping, there's a few of you, think I'm missing some thought about Anthony's question or overlooking something.
I really agree with that. I think it's all about context, because I've been a member of different communities that have different kinds of intersections, and they're, part of a movement, and they're trying to converge into a greater movement, and they're using a mapping environment to do that. But I think that you have to be really careful about context, not only the context that you bring to a network, but that you're there to learn about the context too. You know, you're there to learn about other people and how do your assets fit into that. And so the more you learn about the network, that's going to affect your profile too, and what you submit to the network in terms of context. It's going to change over time, and it's a lot. It really stretches your your thinking, but once you kind of get used to going from context to context, it's much easier. So I think it's all contextual.
Yeah, I think the tension that I was feeling in my heart as I was trying to respond to that question was the tension between a generative network definitely is inviting human beings to show up with their whole selves, their whole being, right? So it's like we want our whole being and we want our stories to be honored and present, and because they're crucial to the transformational capacity. And at the same time, the core purpose is the we part of it. So it's like a big tension in networks is always, how do we balance the individualism with the collectivism? And so right now that's part of the discussion about the map, is how do we get as much of the whole person there without turning it into all the negative parts of individualism that we see, like in the United States right now. So, and how do we also honor the individualism of every other person within that particular context of the work we're trying to do together? So it was really philosophical as well as technical. Does anybody else want to add anything to that? Anyone who understands how sort of the constraints of this kind of mapping? Mary or Reiner? Or Gladys?
From my side, you pinned it down quite carefully. So I'm with your words and your feelings and guts and expressions. So that's it.
Thank you. Mary, anything?
It's about relationships and how we can, it's the we aspect, how we can actually achieve more through our relationships with others. And so it's a picture of abundance and creativity of what we can create through our relationship with others.
I love that. And I love that you remind me of that it's a picture of abundance, a picture of creativity.
One thing I would like to add, it's a kind of building resonance between the people that are showing up there in the net. So yeah, that's the
Great.
next.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone other questions of any sort? I can't believe all of you are sitting there.
I have a few I've been holding on to for the after 30 minutes, but if you want to open it up to now, we
Sure.
could do that. Okay. Mauricio had a question that was about sharing profiles in multiple maps. So if he is still here, he could talk about that more.
Yes. So sharing profiles in multiple maps is actually not doable because each profile is, well, in part because we haven't built the technology to do that. And we haven't built the technology to do that in part because it would be really complicated and expensive and hard and might cause me and Tim's brains to have a meltdown because every profile is context specific. So for instance, the profile, all the information that you put into the social system map and community of practice map, none of that would be relevant for the pastoralists map. And so maybe it would be that I would share something about myself in one map that I actually wouldn't want to have shared in a different context. And so the degree of mapping meaning to meaning and complexity and permissions that would have to go into that would be like a whole systems data catastrophe, not a catastrophe, but it's way beyond where we are today. And other people have asked for it from a human being perspective. When you're just looking at it, you know, at its most basic level, it seems like a really desirable thing to not have to fill out too many surveys. But at the moment, that's not doable, and that's why. Sorry. Wish I could make it.
And then, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Kara.
Denise had a question about access, if she wants to talk about that more.
Okay.
Yes, thank you for the presentation, and thanks, Kara, for remembering my question. I am often run into a situation where people will call me and they'll want to know who's a grant writer in my organization, or like in our network, or who can support mental health issues, like just particularly under COVID in particular areas. So I'm wondering, when the map is done, can people who've completed the survey do their own searches, or do I have to be the main conduit through which they can find out, like do a search grant writers, and then they could find out who in their area is a grant writer?
Yes.
That was all.
Yes. One of the goals of this whole thing is, so I have a friend who is Hmong, and she, one of the ways she described it once is, this is just a picture of what's in the elders' brains, you know, like like we're just making it so that you don't have to go to grandma and ask her who's, you know, who to go to for what. So and that is a piece of it, is there's power in being the one who decides, you know, in being the one who, in being the gatekeeper for the knowledge of the network. And so part of the philosophical goal is to reduce that power and spread it out so that there's more agency throughout the network. It also is a lot of work to be that hub person who handles all the information. So it's also to liberate that hub person. And yes, absolutely. The challenges to that will be that, you know, in a perfect world, other people would just do it. But the challenges will be, not everybody will answer the questions and do the survey. And so it might be that your greatest grant writer is too busy writing grants to do the survey. And so they will be overlooked, which they might be just as happy about if they're too overworked. But B, a lot of people will still prefer to go to you, and will have some, there will be some, just in lots of communities, there are people who will get anxious about going to the, like they don't actually learn it enough to actually go do that. It would take them 2 minutes to do it. But so there's a technical comfort level that you have to be willing to deal with in order to get to that kind of a place. But technically and theoretically, that's the goal. And it
Okay.
isn't that hard. So the hard parts are what's in people's minds, what the mindsets. The easy part is the technology.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Are there more, Kara?
Jude, and just diving deeper into the privacy options for what is private on that.
Yeah. Jude, go ahead. Jude disappeared.
I think you already addressed that question. I had another one about, just a suggestion that maybe assets are how people can address their individual contributions to that question of the individual versus the we.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally agreed. And that's sort of why I was saying it's not like no, it's like, how do we fit it? Which, so when you're asking the asset questions or the offers and ask questions, you're still constraining them by the needs or the dynamics of the system or the network. You're not saying, you know, like if I used to do wonderful macrame sculptures, and I think that's a really key component of myself, and our network really doesn't need to know that, then, I mean, doesn't need to know that because it's not, they would need to, this is where the tension is. They might need to know that in order to know me and to know what I bring, but it's not part of the system changing dynamics aside from me being energized in the system. So, and if you have so many things, you know, if you have hundreds of categories in that dimension, they'll become meaningless because it's too much to actually filter and sort in a quick, easy, meaningful way. So for like in Denise's network, the possibility of somebody going through every single, you know, hundreds of here's what I did items, like hundreds of profiles to find a grant writer. If grant writing is really a key element and a key skill to that context, you want that to be called out as its own thing so that a person can find it quickly and not have to go through every name and look through their profile and look for the word grant writing and see maybe they can do. So that's what I'm talking about, part of that tension of the constraints of the we versus the showing up of the me and all that. But you're right, that is one of the places that would technically be doable. It makes sense.
If one of the questions was, if one of the assets was research.
Yep.
That's a pretty broad thing.
Yep.
So would you dive down in the profile, or would you dive down a little bit more in the overall platform, like you'd have, you know, action research or?
Right. So one of the common things we do is we'll have a finite list of categories that are relevant in that context. So research might be one of them, grant writing might be another one. And then, so that's like a checkbox, and you check off which skills or strengths you have. And then we'll have an open-ended text saying, you know, just saying, you know, tell us more or other, so that first we get the categorization so that we can filter quickly and easily. And then let's say you've filtered on, you know, the 5 people in the network who do research, then you go and read their panels, you know, their side panels where the open-ended text is, and then you see what kind of, if they've said more about what that means to them, then at least you're not making people who are looking for researchers go through every side panel in the network. And at the same time, you're getting to that level of detail. So that's a way of combining the individual piece plus the context we piece.
Right.
Who was it, I'm sorry, that had the privacy questions? And is she still here?
That was me, and you talked about.
Oh, that was you. Okay, I'm sorry. So do you have a moment to stick around? I'm sorry I put that off. It was kind of detailed enough to not want to do at the front before we shared the map.
Sure.
Do you have a minute to stick around after and I can explain it to you? Because we're at the top of the hour.
Yes.
Okay.
Say, I will say just a comment to everybody. In Kumu, you can hide fields. So like say you have an email field and you don't want people to see it, you can hide it, but you can find it really easy with a really simple hack, and anybody can do it. So when you hide things in Kumu, they're not actually truly hidden. They're only not showing on the canvas. So just to be aware of that. Yeah.
Okay. So if you want to know more detailed than that about that topic, stick around, or if you've got anything else you want to talk about. But let's all unmute ourselves for a moment so we can say a note of appreciation to one another and say goodbye and wish each other on our way. You don't have to do this, but we like to close with, especially if we haven't heard your voices at all, I'm going to count down from 3 to 2 to 1, and then we'll just all say our welcome, our greeting, our appreciation of one another all at the same time, and then we can all hang up, or whoever needs to. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Thank you so much for joining, everybody.
Thank you.
Nice.
Great.
I appreciate this.
Bye.
See you.
Thank you.